All right, next up, we have Druid. And our first card for Druid is, boom, Bottomless Toy Chest. This is 2-cost spell. Discover a card from your deck. If you have spell damage, copy it. One thing that Druid has gotten quite a lot of in sort of recent history is basically effects like this that are like, hey, you get extra access to copies of cards from your deck. This one feels pretty powerful. Just 2 costs. It's a 2-cost tracking, which is not particularly good. But if you have spell damage, copy it. Is very powerful for basically any kind of deck that is looking to utilize spell damage, and many of them are going to be combo oriented. So having access to not only specific cards within your deck that you can find to set up your combo, but also possible copies of those can be quite powerful. So spell damage Druid, as we're going to see going through the rest of the cards in the deck, is a heavily supported archetype in this set. And, this seems like a pretty clear staple card for those style of decks, and even something that in the right context could see play outside of that just as additional consistency in other forms of combo decks. Next up, we have Chia Drake. So this is a 4-cost 2/4 dragon with miniaturize. Choose one, gain +1 spell damage, or draw a spell. So this is, I think, a pretty powerful card. Obviously, just like by its raw stats, like a 4-cost 2/4 with either spell damage or draw a card, not particularly good. But miniaturize on this is quite powerful because you can say just play 4-cost 2/4 draw a card and then save a 1-cost spell damage 1 card in your hand to be able to enable your various spell damage combo tools to just kill your opponent with a bunch of spell damage. Or if that doesn't work out, hey, I'll just play it and draw a spell. So this is, like later in the game too, you can just play both in one turn. This can be 5 mana, spell damage +2 or draw 2 spells. Just a very, very strong card that really showcases, how powerful the miniaturize effect is, allowing you to, get access to multiple iterations of, these potentially quite powerful effects. Next up we have Insmallin, which is a throwback to Embiggen. Embiggen was just like, was it 0 cost or 1 cost? Give everything in your deck +1/+1. But this is reduce the cost and attack of minions in your deck by 1. 3 costs. So this is a very interesting card. This feels like something that, like, in any kind of like combo-ish style deck that you can like just play Insmallin and like set up your, say, card draw cards or your combo cards or whatever. You don't really care about their attack necessarily. They're mostly there just because you're looking to get whatever sort of utility effect from them. But this is I think quite interesting. You need a lot of card draw to support this because obviously if you spend 3 mana doing effectively nothing, and then don't immediately draw minions that are able to take advantage of this, really wants to go into a deck with like a higher density of minions or like a very, very dedicated combo that needs the cost reduction across multiple cards in order to be effective. But yeah, I doubt this is going to be a particularly commonly played card. But I do think this is the sort of card that it's like, okay, well, when the right tools come together, this is the sort of thing that can be like really, really gross when it's setting up sort of combo kills and things like that. Like for instance, I could imagine it being played with this Jade Display. So this is obviously a throwback to Jade Idol, but this is a 1/1 with Death Rattle. Your Jade displays have +1/+1 this game. Shuffle 2 of them into your deck. So this is the endless undying thing. Who knows? Maybe you Insmallin your Jade displays so now they cost 0 once you've shuffled a bunch of them into your deck. Probably not good, right? Because the whole point is they get bigger. But this is very much like, hey, we have the sort of endless cycle of dudes. It's just Jade displays now. It's not just a bunch of things that also cycle up with them. So unlikely to be all that powerful relative to previous Jades. Also the fact that there's like Reno is in the metagame right now. Even a control deck can potentially like poof your Jade displays. That they're also can, because it's a death rattle rather than just an effect that you're casting on your turn. They can be silenced. So you don't have the ability to kind of get them as like the endless cycle that previously you were potentially able to do. It's worth noting that this is something that you can use with like Endless Swarm. I don't think did Endless Swarm rotate? Endless Swarm might have rotated, but like this plus Endless Swarm to be able to just like keep getting them back because it's Death Rattle that they all get this bonus. And also, I think Steam Cleaner is rotating, so you can't Steam Cleaner them. But anyway, mostly I think this is like needed a callback. I don't think it's likely to be the sort of card that's going to have tremendous amount of impact on the metagame. Next up, Magical Dollhouse. One cost location with 3 durability. Get spell damage +1 this turn only. So I love locations. I think locations just have been such a boon to Hearthstone's design space, giving you the ability to have cards like this that it's like, hey, I can build a deck around, being able to have spell damage to enable my cards, and I don't have to like play a minion every single time that I want to play a spell damage synergy card and risk getting it killed and then having to basically only ever have those things be like, hey, I set up to combo kill you, right? Like this enables, hey, I can, use my card that like, you know, draw, like discover the card from my deck and copies it if I have spell damage. I can do that in turn 2, right? This is clearly a card that is like going to be a staple in these things that these cares about spell damage decks. For that reason, right? Like you can enable those things without having to have dedicated, a full card to enable like just that particular thing being online. Be able to just turn 1 Dollhouse, turn 2 Toy Chest, in order to like find additional copies of your stuff. Certainly, just like a very very powerful 1-2 punch as far as like synergy is concerned to give you additional consistency and not have to just consistently add resources or expend resources in order to enable those things. But as far as big payoffs for spell damage, Aulonius. 7 cost 6/6 spell damage +1. Your spells get double bonus from spell damage. So clearly this is a boomkin. Looking to boom people. We've seen moonbeam decks previously. We saw this play a bunch of spell damage things, bring them back with Endless Swarm, which we were just talking about with respect to the Jade dudes. But yeah, this is some serious boomkin action. So your spell getting double damage, double bonus from spell damage with the ability to have like cheap spell damage off of the miniaturized dragon as well as off of the location and this itself. You can pretty handily set up, hey, I'm going to get a bunch of spell damage and nuke people. So yeah, I mean, I am typically not a huge fan of like that being a play pattern that is significantly pushed. Of I'm gonna just get a bunch of spell damage and kill you in 1 turn, but I do feel like there's sufficient, like as long as there's sufficient disruptive tools, I'm generally totally fine with that. I believe Dirty Rat is still around in core, if I'm not mistaken. So being able to like Dirty Rat out their combo piece or Dirty Rat out their miniaturized dude or whatever, certainly gives you at least some degree of control over that kind of thing. So I'm not really super concerned, but it is the sort of deck that if it becomes like a prominent and dominant style of deck, it definitely will be very frustrating. Next up, this is a sort of card that will definitely not be in a dominant deck, but is super cool. Sky Mother Aviana. This is obviously a throwback to the original Aviana, which was your minions cost 1. That got used with like Kun Aviana, just like play a bunch of stuff, blow people up. But yeah, Battlecry, shuffle 10 random legendary minions in your deck. They cost 1. It's just really cool. Like this is something that I love because your game plays out differently each time, and you still are winning with with minions and not like just nuking people into oblivion with burn. And maybe somehow getting multiple instances of this is super fun. You just keep getting more and more and more random legendary minions. That's what I enjoy. Nonsense. That's why I play Hearthstone. That is true Hearthstone. But I don't think this is the sort of card that will be a particularly competitive card, like I said, simply because a 6-mana 5/5 by itself, obviously pretty terrible, and then it doesn't do anything until you start drawing the random legendary minions, and there's so many bad like random legendary minions that you could draw. So I think it's hilarious and awesome, probably not any good. Next up, we have Sparkling File. 3 costs arcane spell, deal 2 damage. Your next card this turn costs that much less. Obviously, a very powerful card for spell damage stuff, right? That much, refers to the amount of damage that's dealt. So if you have like Alonius or whatever, and you Alonius into Sparkling File with like 2 spell damage, this is doing 8. This is doing what, 8 damage, and then or no, 6 damage. Yeah, it'd be 6 damage, and then your next thing costs 6 less. You can just Sparkling File into something into Moonbeam, and they explode. But yeah, this is obviously like a combo kill style card. But because it is not necessarily just combo kill, right? Like this can be like a tempo removal card alongside the spell damage things that can allow you to, you know, uh, kind of stabilize a board as well. It's not just like a Moonbeam, which is like, okay, I need to desperately use this to, either kill you or like, kill your minion. This can be essentially like a play that can be used as removal alongside spell damage in order to get like a tempo play as well, which is kind of cool. Next up, we have Wind Up Sapling. 2 cost 2/1 with tradable Battlecry Refresh 1 mana crystal. Most of these wind up cards seem like they're kind of bad to me. This one, obviously, over the course of a long game, if you get to trade it a lot, if you're drawing a lot of cards, can be a powerful combo tool to give you a bunch of extra mana on a turn. You need to trade this at least twice before it's mana positive, right? Like it needs to be the first time it's just mana neutral after you've drawn, or not even the first time. The second time through your deck, once you've drawn it after trading it, it's still just mana neutral. So it feels like it's going to be pretty difficult for this to ultimately end up being a particularly effective tool in a lot of these decks, just because it requires you to go through your deck so fast to get trading it 2, 3, 4 times before it's really worth it. It's one of the things weird. It's weird to me, by the way. The wind up cards are not mechs. Feels like they literally have wind up things. Why is this not a mech? All the wind up things feel like they ought to be mechs to me. But that's not the sort of thing that would matter for this particular card's effectiveness. But yeah, overall, definitely I think a card that will have some potential in like combo strategies, but does feel like it's too slow and too like unreliable because you need to keep charging it up to be a effective tool for many particularly popular decks at least. And lastly, Woodland Wonders. Summon 2 1/5 beetles with taunt, costs 3 less if you have spell damage. So this is, potential tool for those spell damage decks to keep yourself alive. With the location, you can just play the location on 1 and get 2 1/5s on turn 2. Maybe there's some kind of like hybrid like spell damage plus dude buff deck. Because this is, the sort of way that you beat combo style decks is typically you attack them. You attack their face. This makes it pretty hard to attack their face. It's a very easy inclusion. And this is just cost 3 less if you have spell damage. It's not cost less per spell damage. So, this won't be like multiply impacted by multiple instances of spell damage. It's not for each spell damage you have, it's discounted. But yeah, it does feel like this is a pretty solid defensive tool for any kind of spell damage combo deck that can buy you some time to assemble the piece that you need. It's very akin to a spreading plague, but obviously much more limited. Not just like, hey, you have minions in any kind of druid deck. Fine, now I have minions. But again, does seem like maybe there's some sort of interesting way to like double dip and play like a spell damage go wide deck, because this is such a powerful go wide style card. If you're able to just play the location and then play this on 2, it's just a lot of stats for low cost. As long as you're able to support both those sort of strategies. But yeah, that's Druid. I think it's pretty clear that spell damage is the primary sort of strategy that is enabled by this set in Druid. There's some pretty major changes to Druid overall with this sort of set release, the rotation, and cards that are leaving core. For instance, we're losing all the sort of iconic Druid ramp, right? Wild Growth's going away, although it's still around with Malfurion's Gift and old school Wild Growth. But we're losing Nourish, you're losing Soul the Forest. So a lot of the tools that were like previously very common in a lot of different Druid style decks are going away, and the sort of major support here again definitely seems to be this sort of spell damage stuff. There's also armor stuff. There's the Spellstones are coming back, which gives us there's also Oaken summons and Thickhide Kodo that are sort of coming back as well. So there's a lot of like other sort of tools that will definitely exist for Druid that isn't just the sort of spell damage stuff because of that. But overall, I feel like Druid is definitely going to be going in a very, very different direction than we have seen it in the past. Although that direction may just be combo still, just not ramp into combo. More like, just sort of play location spell damage and now blow you up. All right, next up we have Hunter. Firstly, we have Fetch. First of all, I love there's just literally a card named Fetch. But 2-cost spell, draw a minion. If it's a beast, draw a spell. So one of the things that historically Hunter's been bad at, over the long term of Hearthstone, is card draw. But this is obviously pretty awesome card draw. If you're playing a deck that only has beasts for minions, this is 2-cost, draw 2, guaranteed to be 1 beast, 1 spell. So this is, I think, a reasonable card for those style decks. Very, very powerful as far as resource generation. However, Hunter is typically a very tempo-oriented class, and spending mana in order to not impact the board can be very challenging when you're playing a class that doesn't have much in the way of recovery tools, doesn't have much in the way of life gain, taunts, etc., etc. But yeah, I think this is a good card, assuming there is a framework around it that ultimately can enable you to have recovery tools. There's also right now the core set added Master's Call, which is the discover a minion in your deck if alter a beast to draw them all, which is another hey, play a lot of beasts card. So there's a reasonable amount of support for that. However, just as I said, you kind of need to be able to recover from whatever it is that your opponent's putting on the board when you're spending mana drawing cards as a hunter, because there are very, very few tools to come back as a hunter. It's very much a class that's built around tempo and built around sort of getting control of the board and staying there, or pressuring rather than recovering. So I question how effective those cards can be, just given the overall framework of the class and the various restrictions that these put on you. Assuming you have to have all beasts, okay, well, what beasts can I be playing? I believe Hollowhound is rotating, which is one of the cards that was the most effective at enabling Hunter to potentially come back in sort of situations like that. And if you are not able to Hollowhound and restore a bunch of life and clear your opponent's board, or as much as you can of it, feels pretty difficult to recover. Oh, I'm actually hearing that Hollowhound might be sticking around, so that's probably assuming we are looking at some sort of deck that is going to be heavily beast oriented, and likely all beasts between this as Master's Call. Hollowhound is going to be a very, very core tool to that, and you really, really need cards that can help support that as well. To give you additional copies of Hollowhound, Breeder's going away and also isn't a beast anyway. So I don't know. I'm very skeptical of the effectiveness of these kind of cards, like I mentioned, even if there is Hollowhound, just because it alone probably isn't enough to sort of keep you in these sorts of games. Anyway, speaking of cards that want to go into decks with a bunch of beasts, but are themselves not beasts, Hemet Foam Marksman. After a friendly beast dies, get a random legendary beast from the past. It costs 2 less. So this is obviously a card that wants to go into a play a lot of beasts deck. One of the things that I like about this set of cards is that there's actually quite a few sort of go wide beast cards, and this is the sweet payoff of hey, you got a bunch of things killed. Well, get a bunch of random legendary beasts. There's a really wide range in random legendary beasts. A huge percentage of the colossals were beasts, which makes you get a pretty high chance of hitting colossals from any individual thing dying, relatively speaking. But there's also like just horrible old beasts, um, like the Beast from the original classic set, and like a lot of the older things like Malorn or things like that. There's just a lot of really bad things you can hit. But that's why this is sort of a numbers game, right? Like you really want to be playing this alongside things that are generating a bunch of beasts, like a bunch of small tokens, so that you can get a fistful of stuff, and there's a good chance that at least some of them will be good. So that's really what this feels like. Wants to go into a deck that is full of cards like RC Rampage. 4 cost spell, summon 6/1/1 hounds, and if they can't fit, give the others +1/+1. So you could very easily play like this on turn 4 and then have it on turn 5 if they have not died, attack a bunch of them in, get a huge set of discounted legendary beasts. These do not have rush or anything, but they are a bunch of little beasts that if you have things that care about those beasts being in play or dying, can be quite effective. So obviously a very strong predecessor to Hemet, or follow up to this Jungle Gym. It is a location. Do 1 damage to a random enemy. Repeat for each friendly beast. So obviously, it's almost like perfect Jungle Gym into RC Rampage. Of hey, I get 6 things, not a 7th because this is my 7th slot, and this is just like boom. So Hemet, Jungle Gym, the Rampage, lots of things that are like, hey, have a bunch of small beasts in play, and this is random enemy, so this can just like nuke your opponent in the face. Um, we talked about this with the hand buff DK guy who triggers the end of each turn. This is the same sort of thing where it's like if you're playing a sort of aggressive deck, you get your board cleared, you can like refill it and then just have damage to the face awaiting. Hunter is very good at that, obviously, with its hero power and things like Kill Command already. But because Kill Command's back, baby. Also, Ball of Spiders is back, as far as like like things that uh, generate multiple small minions and can potentially give you additional value. That one's also a reasonable follow up to just Jungle Gym, right? You're gonna absolutely have it got changed to 3 cost, make 3 web spinners with Death Rattle, get a random beast. Much more powerful than the 6 cost version of the past, that's for sure. But yeah, Jungle Gym, definitely a powerful card for a go wide beast strategy for sure. But it's not just going wide with beasts, there's also going big, like King Plush. So 9 cost 6/6 charge. King Crush has gotten a little smaller, but Battlecry, return all minions with less attack than this to their owner's decks. Not hands, decks. So this is something that can potentially use hand buff style effects to get even bigger, but can also just get around any kind of like taunt, death rattle taunt, anything that is not big. But yeah, this is just a really powerful card. Um, like it is, as long as your opponents don't have gigantic things, and if you have any kind of way to buff it, like there's Messenger Buzzard, right? Messenger Buzzard is not going anywhere. Being able to buff your King Plush even bigger and bounce all of your opponent's things into their deck, and then just bash them in the face as well. So yeah, definitely, this is definitely a very exciting tool that isn't just finisher, right? It can be a finisher, especially if you're buffing it, but can also just be like board control, so you don't die because it's able to remove your opponent's board of medium-sized things. Next up, we have Mystery Egg. 5 cost 0/3 with miniaturize. Death Rattle, get a copy of a random beast in your deck. It costs 5 less. So this is not itself a beast, so not likely to go well into a Master's Call or Fetch deck. And it's also like, it's just an 0/3, so it can't even attack. So you need to, figure out a way to get killed. This feels like a hard card to play. Unless you have like, good ways to buff this. It's just like, okay, well, what are you actually doing with this, right? 5 costs do nothing unless you have a way to like immediately trigger the death rattle, which there aren't really, or ways to like give it taunt. Definitely a card that I think can be very powerful if you are playing a big beast style strategy and have ways to enable it. But it feels like it requires it requires too much work to really enable this as far as like the, the overall payoff you're getting and the amount that you have to expend up front. The miniaturize is great too, right? Like you potentially get like you do get a 1/1, which can get itself killed much more easily than the original egg. So that's good. And if you get like additional copies of say king plushes or whatever, maybe you're getting, like hollow hounds and you're able to, buy back some of the time that you lost from the original egg because of that. But again, you have to get the egg killed in the first place, right? You're not actually even getting this effect until this dies, and your opponent's not exactly going to attack and kill it. So definitely feels like this is a challenging card to make work, but the payoff is pretty huge. Here's one way that you can take advantage of big boards. I was going to say that you can get your egg broken, but no, it only affects beasts. This is clearly a throwback to Crackling Razor Maw, which was an all-star of the Ungoro days. Razor Maw was it was Battlecry adapt a beast. So the draw of Dire Mole into Razor Maw was absolutely killer. You give your Dire Mole like +3 attack or Wind Fury or something, and you just be off to the races. We live in a different world now, so that's not quite as potent as it might have been back then. But this is give each other random beast each other friendly beast a random bonus effect. So obviously this sort of thing that's extremely powerful alongside stuff like RC Rampage or any other way that you are generating a bunch of beasts. The random effects are all of the characteristics that are able to happen from Amalgam, one Amalgam band. So there's 8 total effects. It's like Wind Fury, Divine Shield, Stealth, Reborn, Life Steal, Taunt, Divine Shield. There's all the ones that one can get. I'm trying to remember all of them. So there's no like plus attack, which does make this like weaker than like the adapt of the original Razor Maw would be on small minions. So it's not necessarily just like, hey, this is great on small minions. It is great if you get like poisonous. That is definitely one of the really powerful ones for say a 1/1 hound or whatever. But it's not like quite the same effect of being able to give them all like +3 attack or whatever. It really obviously depends contextually. There's also no like death rattles or things to protect you from removal, although Divine Shield obviously is something that could be good. But yeah, overall, I think this is this obviously a very powerful payoff card for the go wide beast decks, and certainly something that people are going to rage when they get what they don't, or they don't get what they want, or the opponents get what they want, and be very sad when the reverse happens. Next we have Patchwork Pals. 3-cost spell. Get all 3 animal companions. They cost 1 less. So this is kind of like Call of the Wild, right? Because this is 3 cost. You get all the animal companions. They cost 1 less. And so you get 3 2-cost animal companions. So old school Call of the Wild was 8. This is Call of the Wild that you can break up over turns. So I think this card is actually like pretty good. Being able to just like get a Leok, and obviously like old Call of the Wild would probably not be good now, right? But the fact that you can just like get a Leok for when you want a Leok, get a Huffer for when you want a Huffer, get a Misha for when you want a Misha, like if you think of this as like 4 mana, play whichever one you want, okay, but like you can like it can be 8 mana, play all of them. It can be like it just feels good, right? It is a resource generating hunter card, which again there aren't that many of, or at least there used to not be that many of. This is a way to get burst damage, a way to defend yourself. It's a way to leverage a wide board. It just feels like a solid card for a lot of different sorts of strategies. If you're playing like a big beast deck that wants to be able to do things in the early game without actually having to put those beasts in your deck, this is like, okay, hey, I can spend my this gives me like reach, gives me like defense. It gives me kind of it all. So I think this is like just a solid card overall for likely a variety of strategies because of the flexibility it gives you and because of the immediate impact that it can have at really any stage of the game because of especially Huffer and Leok. So next up we have this is I think a very important card for the go wide style decks, Remote Control. A 2-cost 1/3 weapon. After your hero attacks, summon a 1/1 hound. So being able to get beasts for 0 mana, and just have some degree of board control from your hero. Hunter historically has struggled with like board control if it does fall behind, as I've mentioned. So weapons can be quite good, and having the ability to get like the 1/1 hound that you're able to like get an extra thing for your whatever painted canvasor, the crackling razor maw-ish dude, or additional things to be able to shoot things with your jungle gym, or to attack with this to make sure that your RC hounds gets you two twos or three threes or whatever, so that you have the appropriate stuff. Just I think overall this just feels like a solid card that will likely be in basically every go wide deck and maybe some more of them. And lastly, Tyrannosaurus. 7 cost, 7/6 rush. Death Rattle, deal 5 damage to a random enemy. This feels like it's just a bit too expensive. This feel like obviously this is a big beast and it can be like board control-ish, but it just answers like a thing. And the fact that it's random enemy, this can maybe be a card that like helps burn your opponent out if you're trading with like a single big dude. But it feels like it's just like not impactful enough, unless you're like discounting it or buffing it. It just feels like 7 mana that isn't guaranteed to go face, and can only possibly answer at least guaranteed one opposing minion. Just feels like it's going to be a stretch to actually find a deck that really wants to play this, or a metagame where this is really effective. Like if there's like a bunch of opposing like 6/5s, this could trade into one of them and maybe trade into the other one, or ways to give this like life steal or something. That's one thing, but this just feels like it's not quite doing enough, and the sort of thing that you want to do at that stage of the game well enough in order to justify including it in really any deck. So that's Hunter. As mentioned quite a few times, I do feel like go wide Hunter and like specifically beast focused Hunter are really heavily supported by this set of cards as well as the cards in the core set. Fetch and Master's Call give you a lot of tools to try and play like a game that can be more sort of value oriented and not necessarily just rush your opponent down. Fortunately, these decks do still have Messenger Buzzard, which can be very effective at buffing up your handful of Hollow Hounds. You have a chance to potentially not just get run over if you are spending your early turns with any sort of card draw with things like Master's Call, and also the King Plush does feel like a very cool over the top big beast style tool, but does require some setup. I feel like I would love to be able to find a way to consistently make Mystery Egg work, because it does feel like a very very cool card to be able to like just play big beasts and tutor copies of them and discount them. But it feels very very difficult to be able to just spend 5 mana, do nothing before you actually get to that point, and I don't really see the right tools to actually enable that working, at least in the card pool just yet. So my plan will be to try playing Hemet Foe Marksman plus a bunch of small beasts and get all kinds of crazy beasts from the past and win the games with those, and just try the other stuff once they maybe have some more tools. All right, next up we have Mage, and boom, first card is Frost Lich Cross Stitch, a 4-cost frost spell. Deal 4 damage to a character. Ooh, we went in and out of focus. If it dies, summon a 3/6 water elemental that freezes. So this is, an interesting card. Like water elemental previously cost 4 mana, and now this is a 5-cost, deal 4. If it dies, summon a 3/6 water elemental. So like if you're just like as a like mid-range-ish removal spell, this is a pretty solid card. If you have anything that like can like reduce the cost of this, pretty powerful. But I think that like mid-range-ish value type games are not super common in most like high-level competitive Hearthstone these days. Maybe we'll see like a switch with the rotation, but there are tools that have synergy with this that can make it so this isn't just hey play at full cost, like, boom, Watercolor Artist. It's a 4-cost 4/4 Battlecry. Draw a Frost spell. At the start of your turns, reduces cost by 1. So there's a couple of important elements to this particular card. It is draw a Frost spell, so you're guaranteed to hit specifically a Frost spell. And the start of your turns, reduce cost by 1. So this is every single turn, that spell keeps getting reduced by 1. So, this is like already 4/4 draw card, but also, hey, you can go get, say, that Frost Lich Cross Stitch, and in a few turns it'll cost like 2 mana, 3 mana, 0 mana. So this is, I think this is a important card to think about when you're looking at cards like the Frost Lich Cross Stitch, which is a mouthful. I think this is like definitely a very interesting and very powerful card that can help both sort of just like be a generally solid value card. And it can also like set up like combos if you have like, you're trying to set up like a big burst damage combo and you have like frost based damage, like the Frost Lich Cross. I'm gonna keep having to say it. And this the reduction, from my understanding, is not tied to this being in play. So this could die, and that card still has its effect reduced by 1, reduced by 1. That's part of the battle cry, not like an effect of the Watercolor Artist. This has to still be in play in order to keep reducing that. So this I think is just a like reasonably solid, just like value style card that can give you some interesting combo and tempo opportunities from the cost reductions in the future as well. Next up, we have Hidden Objects. 2-cost, discover a secret, set its cost to 1. This is, I think, a pretty interesting card. We're losing some of the major, the sort of like secret synergy style cards in this set. There's no more like Orion, I believe, is from Castle Nathria. So that's sadly going away. But being able to like use this with like, say, Contract Conjurer, or with like Shady Bartender, to give you access to cheap secrets, to be able to enable those things that care about you having secrets, is pretty nice. We are losing Objection, which was obviously the singular most both powerful and frustrating secret that existed. So Secret Mage can definitely use some serious help alongside that shift. But I think that considering the loss of Objection, considering the loss of Orion, probably not likely to see a lot of like secret-based strategies until we have more support from them. So this is unlikely to see play in the near future, but I would not be surprised to see additional secret synergy cards where this becomes a powerful option for those styles of deck in the future. Next up, Manufacturing Error. 6-cost, draw 3 cards. If your deck has no minions, they cost 3 less. So obviously, Spell Mage, all Spell Mage being pushed fairly substantially with this. And this is basically just like Skull, right? This is like post-nerf Skull Gul'dan with no Outcast. Obviously, when you are, drawing, not able to draw minions, you're not able to have like nearly the same like level of like tempo. But when you're playing the discounted things, but like just draw 3, they all cost less, is just real powerful, right? So yeah, I think that as far as like things that care about things that are worth playing no minions for, Skull of Gul'dan is one of them. Skull of Gul'dan that does not require Outcast. So it's unclear whether we'll necessarily see enough support for like no minion mage, but even just like playing having this, you can already play like the keyboard, cosmic keyboard or whatever it is, to give you some amount of tempo. You can just play that on 2 and then start playing spells and generating minions on 3. Cold Case does go away. Cold Case was Nathria era, so you don't have necessarily that many. You're losing some of the ways to generate minions, but there is now this. Spot the difference. As far as things that can generate tempo, a 4-cost spell, discover a 3-cost minion to summon. If your deck has no minions, repeat this. This is one of those like you would literally never play this if it wasn't with no minions. But yeah, this is summon two 2 3-cost minions. It's a discover effect, so it's not random, which makes it so much better. Just get a random 3-cost, 2 random 3-costs, much worse. Being able to discover, very likely to be able to hit something with some sort of immediate board impact, well, whether it's, or just like a lot of stats. Be able to get like a, injured Blade Master style card, the injured hauler, or getting like, taunts or death rattles can all be quite powerful alongside this. So yeah, definitely a couple of minionless cards that are solid support, along with this one, Yogg in the Box. 8-cost spell, cast 5 random spells. If your deck has no minions, the spells cost 5 or more. Well, there you go. There's some payoff. We all love our random spells, don't we? But yeah, this is obviously there's like a lot of history of various cast a bunch of random spells, and they're always better than you expect, right? Like Rune of the Archmage is quite powerful. The Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron is quite powerful. This is cheaper than either of them, and again, it is at least guaranteed mana cost 5 or more if you have no spells. So that's basically the deck you're going to be playing this in. So 5 random spells that at least cost 5, it can be very, very, very powerful. It can't cast itself, I assume, but I believe that you can have it be recast by this, the Galactic Projection Orb. Recast a random spell of each cost you cast this game. Targets enemies if possible. So this is obviously like a huge, powerful, legendary payoff card for playing not even necessarily playing only spell, but the wording of this is really confusing. This says recast a random spell of each cost you cast this game. It is not a random spell of the costs of the spells you cast this game. It is the spells themselves. So this recast a random spell of each cost. If you've only cast Yogg in a Box for 8, it will recast Yogg in a Box. It won't cast a random 8-cost spell. It recasts one of the spells of that cost that you have cast this game. So for instance, if you've only cast Yogg in a Box at 8, you've only cast the draw 3 discount if you have no spells at 6, it will cast those spells, not a random 6 and a random 8. So a pretty powerful payoff. Obviously something that you need to pay attention to, not just playing a ton of card draw and fatiguing yourself when you do cast it. And yeah, it has to be a spell that you cast. It can't be something that like got cast by, Wisdom Ball or whatever. You need to have actually spent the mana and cast the spell yourself. But yeah, I feel like this sort of like, all spell crazy mage deck is going to be a ton of fun to play and something people will hate to play against. So speaking of Wisdom Ball, boom, Puzzle Master Khadgar, 6 cost 5/5 Battlecry. Equip a 0/6 Wisdom Ball that casts helpful mage spells. So there is a selection of mage spells that this will cast, and I'm getting the list right now. I do not have it in front of me. So yeah, this will cast a random spell at the end of your turn. So it has immediate game impact, right? And it will look at the game state and decide not necessarily the absolute best spell each turn to cast, but a helpful one. And it can cast, here's the list: Polymorph, Arcane Missiles, Mirror Image, Frostbolt, Arcane Intellect, Fireball, Counterspell, Ice Barrier, and Blizzard. So it will not necessarily just always cast Blizzard if your opponent has a bunch of stuff. It might cast Polymorph on their biggest thing. It might cast any number of things. It might just cast Arcane Missiles. They have some small things. It might just cast, Ice Barrier. It will cast one of the things that it sees and is like, hey, this seems useful. And yeah, this is like, I think a card that will be both hilarious and tilting when it doesn't cast the thing that you want. But it's always helpful. No matter what it does, it might not be exactly what you want, but it's what Wisdom Ball decided that you need. Next up, we have Sleet Skater, 5 cost 3/4 elemental with Miniaturize. Battlecry, freeze an enemy minion, gain armor equal to its attack. So this is, I think, actually a pretty like quietly powerful card. It's obviously very metagame contingent. If there is a metagame where there's like large minions, this could be a very, very powerful card. You know, being able to freeze a big thing twice and gain armor twice, based on its cost, quite strong. Or not its cost, its attack rather. You know, the survivability that you get from this is, you know, is pretty solid, right? Like armor gain in a sort of like controlling mage deck can be, you know, very, very appealing, very effective. Um, and like it is an elemental. I don't really feel like the style of like elemental mage deck is, you know, that I have at least played historically, is necessarily the sort of thing that wants like this kind of card. But it is like, you know, it is an option. You know, if they're sort of like, again, like mid range or large minions, where this can like buy you some time to get to sort of bigger things. I do think there's like, you know, some hilariousness that can happen with, you know, Therazanes and like, you know, trying to buy time to get like truly enormous giant monsters, and then maybe your opponent's gonna have their own Sleet Skater and then gain 8 billion armor. But again, very metagame dependent. Really, only something that is effective in a world of like, you know, relatively large minions. I don't know if we live in that world, or are likely to, but definitely an option to keep in mind if we do. Lastly, another elemental, Triple Wick Trickster. Meh. This just feels like such a weird card to me. Battlecry, deal 2 damage to a random enemy 3 times. Like, obviously, if your opponent has no minions, this is like just a fireball connected to an elemental body. Maybe this is good if you like Mesa Dune it and get 2 of them. You know, you get like a 2/2 and a 2/1 that each have this battle cry for 2 mana. Maybe it's like a reasonable card against like aggressive decks where they have a bunch of like 2 health minions and you can like, you know, you can blast them and you know, like use this for board control. Maybe this is better than I'm thinking it is, right? But like it just feels like it has such a chance to like, you know, backfire and like not kill what you want because it's random enemy. And like say they have like a 4/4 and you're like, okay, I hit your face for 4 and you for, you know, your thing for 2, and it's like, oh, okay, well now you just get to like, you know, dome me or whatever. um but yeah, this feels medium. Maybe it is just a good tempo tool for a like aggressive like mid-rangey elemental deck, and I'm like, you know, not evaluating it appropriately. There are crucially some important new elementals that are going to be in core. Like Firefly, crucially, is being added to core as, you know, a 1-drop elemental that makes it a lot easier to keep your sort of elemental chain going. Siamat is being added to core as a 7/7 rather than a 6/6, so it's another like reasonable elemental that, you know, is going to be giving you a bit more on the sort of high end of potentially gaining some board control with it. But I don't know if that's enough, right, to make that good. And crucially, you're losing Egwin and you're losing Frozen Touch, which were, you know, 2 of the major ways that, at least in the version of Elemental Mix that I was playing, gave you reach in the long game. So maybe this is the sort of thing. It's like, hey, instead of that, you have this. But I don't know. Feels like it's just likely to lead to disappointment. And you know, maybe it's the sort of thing that, like, if you are trying to play a deck that's following an elemental curve every game, gives you, you know, enough sort of interaction in the sort of middle game, that makes it worth it. But anyway, that's Mage. I think it's pretty clear that the standout from the new set as far as getting major support is the no minion Mage. It's a lot of like no minion style Mage decks in the past have been like stuff like Quest Mage, which have just really not been that fun for me. This one seems like a blast though. You know, this one gives you all sorts of wild like things with like Yogg in the Box, the Galactic Projection Orb, even like the, you know, manufacturing error and spot the difference with, you know, the Skull Gul'dan effect and like the summon discovered dudes. Like those are the sort of things that like can lead to really interesting diversity of play experiences, rather than just like, hey, I'm looking to build to exactly burn you out with this sort of combo. But if what you're getting out of it is random spells go, random spells go, random spells go, that feels a lot more fun to me. So that's the sort of deck that I'm definitely looking to play.